Hey, so welcome. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged Code of Jewish Law, chapter 95. So we're going to start discussing Erev Techumen. Now, it's a different type of Erev. So till now, we've been discussing an Erev that allows us to carry, either to expand our own home or a courtyard or a city, that essentially turns a large area into a glorified residence. You know, everyone's sharing the same kitchen or some type of kitchen where there's food, and that makes the entire town or courtyard or whatever it happens to be one residence for Shabbos. So this is a totally different type of Erev, which those who live in big cities don't come across too often. So this Erev is called Erev Techumen. Now, what happens is that from the limits of your town, there's a limit to how far you can walk on Shabbos, so you can travel. So we have a verse that tells us that we can't leave our place on Shabbos, our residence. That does not mean you can't leave your home. Obviously, you're allowed to leave your home. As a matter of fact, if you're able to and go to shul and various things, one should leave their home. So our residence doesn't refer to our actual home. It refers to, if we're in some type of town, refers to the town. It could refer to our immediate vicinity if we're out in the open, camping, and we'll explain this shortly. But let's start with the town. So let's say we live in a little village like the little shtetl in Europe used to be, or a country town, or in a bungalow colony or something, or in Israel, some of the smaller settlements. So once we leave the built-up area where all the houses are, we can only travel 2,000 amos on Shabbos. So approximately a kilometer, approximately 2/3 of a mile. Now, if you live in a large city, so I'm currently living in Phoenix, so I could probably walk the entire Shabbos in Phoenix and still be amongst houses, right? And a lot of cities are like that. When I was, in Chicago, I've been there. I guess it depends where, right? I guess there's some people who live in the last suburb of the city, but generally, if you live in a large city, you just keep going. Florida, you just say walk up Collins, you keep walking the entire Shabbos, and you are not going to run out of houses. But if you were in a small town or somewhere in the country or one of the settlements in Israel, once you leave the built-up area, in this chapter, we're going to give a definition of what's called built-up, because obviously as we get further out, the houses get further and further apart. So we will give a definition of what's considered outside the city limits. It's not necessarily what the city calls the city limits, right? There's some country towns that you might have these farms and you've got houses that are 2-3 miles apart from each other, but they're all officially in that city. So that's the official city limits is not the definition. It's going to be how far apart houses are or businesses or different things like that. And as I said, we'll get to that definition. But once we leave that limit, we can only go 2,000 amos, I said approximately 2/3 of a mile, approximately a kilometer on Shabbos. Now, this is even though we're walking. Now, if you're in the city limit, then there's no limit how far you can go. Okay. I've walked not often, but I did it a few times, 24 kilometers on Shabbos. I don't know what's that, about 18 miles or something. It wasn't fun. but we needed to get to a minyan. It was the year I was saying Kaddish for my mother, and it happened. So, but it was all within the houses, along the roads, all the way, and so there was no problem. So within a city, you can walk the entire length and breadth of the city, no matter how large the city or town is. It's only once you leave the limits of the town or the city that we now have this limit. So let's just use the country town model because it's easier. There's our little town. We've got our 100 homes, so we can easily walk to the border of the town. And I want to go somewhere further than 2,000 amas, further than the 2/3 of a mile that I'm allowed to go on Shabbos. So what I could do is before Shabbos, and it has to be before Shabbos. Before Shabbos, I could, yeah, Ben.
Yeah, what if the town is split by a highway or a river or whatever?
So we're going to get to all these definitions, and it's really going to depend on the size.
Okay.
And it is a crossable, you know, there's a bridge in the middle of town. So we'll get to these issues. Excellent question. But I'm just giving the general principles, the introduction. So I want to go further than the 2,000 amas. So what I can do is before Shabbos, I can set up my Shabbos residence in a different place. So what I'll do is, let's say I want to travel 3,000 amas on Shabbos. So 1,000 amas out of town, well, let's keep it simple, 1,500 amas out of town. I'll put food there before Shabbos. I'll make it an announcement, a declaration, and again, we'll get to that shortly, exactly the procedure. But essentially, I set up that area as my primary Shabbos residence. And then I go back home. I can go home because it's within the 2,000 amas of my new residence. It's only 1,500 away. And because the 2,000 amas is a radius, so therefore, on Shabbos, I now walk to this, from my home to this Shabbos residence that I set up before Shabbos. So when I get there, I get to zero again, to how far I can go. And I can now travel 2,000 amas from this new residence. And then I can go further on Shabbos. To David.
This new residence is on public property?
Yeah, but we're going to see that it can be public property. And again, we'll discuss places that it can and can't be. You know, we're going to, you know, if it ends up being somewhere we can't access on Shabbos, because you actually have to be able to eat the food. You know, we'll in this chapter, we'll get to all the details. But for the time being, let's presume it's pretty much everywhere, because there's only a few places that it can't be, right? And even places you can't go, but someone else can go is still good. I'll give an example. I mean, let's say the person who's setting it up is a Kohen. So someone sets it up for him, so he can't go into a cemetery, but it's in the cemetery. So, you know, we're going to discuss these types of things. So you can have someone set it up for you. You don't have to set it up yourself. A friend of mine, when he was studying in yeshiva in Israel, yeshiva was outside Jerusalem, and now it's all built up. You know, it's been a few years between my friends and I, we yeshiva bofrim, you know, or, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years, something like that. But anyway, now it's built up the whole way in between where the yeshiva was and Jerusalem proper. Jerusalem's swallowed that area. But at that time, if you wanted to walk to Yerushalayim on Shabbos, it was I guess more than 2/3 of a mile. So you had to set up this Erev Techumim on the way, and there was a fellow who lived in the middle, and whoever wanted to do that used to call him up. His telephone number was on the notice board next to the payphone. Remember those? Next to the payphone in the yeshiva, and people used to call up and say, I'm whoever, Yankel Berelstein, can you set up an Erev Techumim for me? And I think there was some type of nominal donation they gave to his organization, and you had that, and you can make that your Shabbos residence. So essentially, the idea of Erev Techumim is to remove your Shabbos residence to somewhere further away, so you can travel. Your 2,000 Amos starts from your Shabbos residence, not where you are. Okay, so that's one type of idea. Another type of idea is if someone was on the road on Shabbos, and they're stuck. It gets dark, or they're on a several-day trip. So normally where they are is going to be the Shabbos residence. They can go. We're going to see if they have to actually set up a residence in order to have the 2,000 Amos. If they don't set up a residence, there'll be circumstances, they can only go 4 Amos, about 6 feet in each direction, because they don't have a Shabbos residence, right? So we need to set up a Shabbos residence. There are going to be times where, let's say, someone has almost made a home, and the terrain, there's a certain tree, let's say halfway between where you are and your home, and it's almost Shabbos, and home is further than the 2,000 Amos. You can, under certain circumstances, set up your residence at the tree without being there again. So we're going to discuss all these types of things, but this is the general introduction. It's essentially a type of Erev where, instead of being Erev to carry, it's an Erev where we set up our Shabbos residence from somewhere in order to gain that we can travel 2,000 Amos from the new residence, not necessarily where we actually are. Right, any questions on that before we go further, before we begin?
I wouldn't say a question. I have one question. If you're setting up your Erev for distance 1,900 Amos away,
yes,
then you cannot go backwards more than 100 Amos.
Correct.
You're allowed a total of 2,000. So you have to be careful if you're planning to go somewhere and you make the Erev, but you end up not going, you've totally closed off your rear travel. That's
correct.
all.
Right. So as we said, so wherever your Shabbos residence is, you have 2,000 Amos radius. Again, if you're in a town, you have the radius of the town, not the radius of you. But if you've made your new residence, you have the Chumim in one direction, that means your other direction, as was pointed out, is limited, as opposed to if you had not made this Erev Techumim, now you can go 2,000 Amos radius from where you are. So we're going to get to these details. So Siman Samech Hey, chapter 95, Dina Erev Techumim. These are the laws of the Erev Techumim. We know literally an Erev of boundaries. Techum means like a boundary, because we have a boundary of how far you can go on Shabbos. Aleph, number 1. Also, let's say b'Shabbos b'Yontiv b'Mokim sheShabbos. Yoyser mitchum. On Shabbos or Yontiv, you are not allowed to travel outside the tchum, outside the boundary of your residence, of your living place. Now, what's the definition of that? This is 2,000 Amos, which again we said is approximately a kilometer, approximately 2/3 of a mile. Now, now, this is an addition to your personal space. Your personal space is 4 amos, approximately 6 feet. And so you have so even if you're in the open, so as we said, if you're in a town, then the 2,000 amos starts from outside the town. But even if you're in the open, you're not in a town, the 2,000 amos starts from outside your personal space. And your personal space is 4 amos, approximately 6 feet. Behind. And this means, for example, imhaya ben shmoshes besada, those twilights, and you're in a field. And we don't necessarily mean a field. What we mean is outside of town. You're in the open. So a person is in the open space. He's camping, he's on the road, whatever happened to be. Ben shmoshes means the time between sunset and nightfall. And just as when we learned about muksa and we learned about some of these other issues, everything's dependent on the status of Ben Shmoshes, of this time between sunset and nightfall. So likewise, with this type of Erev, or for that matter, every type of Erev, the status has to be in place during this twilight period. So twilight is in a field, in the open. Then he has his own personal space. From his own personal space, he has an additional 2,000 amos. However, if he's inside a city, a town, a village, whatever, the entire town is his personal space. It is his space. The burishal ir, nachshav gam kein la'ir, and literally the pregnant parts of the city, in other words, the bits that stick out, and we'll define that in a moment. What counts for that is part of the city. So let's say, the city limits is not a straight line. It goes, sort of like that. So we look at the border as if it went straight from the most furthest part of the town. So that's what we mean by the addition parts, the bits sticking out. That's also considered part of the city, and the 2,000 amos begin from there. Okay, so far, again, just to sum it up, we've said that we can only walk. By travel, of course, we mean in a permissible way on Shabbos, and not in a car, like the person used to, the joke of the fellow who was driving on Shabbos, and they said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "There's an Erev, I'm carrying my car." Right? So he put the seatbelt on and he attached it and he carried it. Right? So we don't mean that, God forbid. We're talking about you're traveling in a permissible way, so walking or whatever happens to be. And from your place, you have 2,000 amos. Your place means if you're in a city, from the outskirts of the city, if you're in the open, from outside 4 amma radius, 6 foot a radius from your spot. So we said there's certain extensions to the city, things that stick out that we say that is the city limit. So the Ezehu Ibura, what is this extension? Yes, Ben.
So the Tchum is different than the Eruv. You cannot carry in the Tchum, in the whole Tchum, only in the Eruv.
Correct. So if you live in a large city, so again, we'll just use Fear as an example, I could probably walk out of the Eruv in half an hour, but the Tchum, even though we use the expression Eruv to extend the Tchum, a different type of Erev, the Tchum, I could keep walking probably the whole Shabbos, and there'll still be houses.
Without carrying.
Right, but I can't carry, right, because I'm outside the Erev Chatzeiros, the Erev allows me to carry. In a small town, you'll have the reverse, right? So, well, not the reverse, but in a small town, the Erev, there's,
You're not
you know,
gonna
might
have
be the
to
whole
do
town. So I can walk through the whole city or the whole town. You know, let's just use an example, you know, the old-fashioned sort of walled cities. Right? So you could walk through the entire city and carry, but once you go outside of that, even though you can go 2,000 amas, we can't carry. So that's right. Thank you for pointing that out. There's the Erev Techumim, the Erev for traveling, and the Erev for carrying are two separate entities, and they usually don't overlap. They one doesn't necessarily have to do with the other, and you might be able to do something in one that you can't do in the other. Thank you for raising that. Very good to avoid confusion. So what are these extensions, these outskirt parts to the city? So we say Shavim Amma or Shnei Shlishi Amma. 70 2/3 of an Amma. So outside the wall, in other words, we say that the open space counts. The Shaykh La'ir Afal Pi She'ein Sham Binyan, that counts even if there's not one building. It's totally open space. So outside the city, totally open space, 70 2/3, so just under 71 amas, is open space, belongs to the city. So you can travel that far before we start counting the 2,000. So, you know, we're going to call that roughly 35 meters. So, you know, I don't know what's that, 24 feet, something like that, roughly. So that open space belongs to the city, even if there's nothing there. V'hu nikra karpaf ha'ir, and this is called the karpaf. Right? It means an enclosure. Right? It's the open space, the parkland. You know, the same way in our own property. You know, if in a house, most places have a little bit of grass on the other side of the sidewalk or something. You know, there's like this little open area. So the same thing is around the city. That's called a karpaf. That's a term that's going to come up. And it's the edge of this area that we begin to count the Techum of Shabbos. Now, we mentioned even if there's no building. So in the introduction, I was talking about if there's a little few buildings here and a building there and maybe a gate, you know, different things. So we're going to see that the karpaf, this open area, could even start from further out. But even if it's a total walled city, there's one smooth end to the city. You still can go another 70, just under 71 amas before we start counting the 2,000 amas. Right. Therefore, if you had two cities, two towns that share a karpaf, so let's say they're 30 amas apart. You know, this. You know, as we know, certain suburbs, they start off as one housing development, then they keep growing, and eventually they come closer and closer. So it's all considered one city in respect to being able to walk on Shabbos. All right, base number 2. Yishu Mekefes Chayma. You got a city that's surrounded by a wall, or same thing would be a bungalow colony that's fenced in, that people, if they go away to the country for the summer, or you know, a summer camp, or one of these settlements in Israel. Now, even the city is incredibly large, very large city. Mahalech is kula, you can cover its entire area, the Ibura and the outskirts, this open area, the Sham Tchum Shabbos, and from there it starts the Tchum Shabbos, the boundary. So, you know, the city might be 500 miles wide. I guess probably no city's that big, but, you know, but again, doesn't have to be the one city. Just the fact there's houses all the way. But, you know, let's say it's 50 miles, the city. You just keep walking, no problems. Now, that even if the city is not walled, But the houses are close to each other. What's the definition of close? As long as the gap between the houses is not larger than the 70 2/3 of an amma. So once you start getting to the, the country, and there might be along the road farm after farm after farm, but the gap between the houses is going to be much larger than this. So that's already, we're starting the tchum. But in a regular city, the houses are much closer than 35 meters apart. So once you get that gap between houses, then in an unwalled city, if it's walled, then even if there is a gap between the houses here and there, it's not a problem. We look at the wall. But if it's an unwalled city, which most of our places in America are, there's no wall around our towns. We don't have to keep out the Mongol hordes. We're safe from that, thank God. But once the houses get more than about 35 meters apart from each other, then that's considered the end of the settlement. And then we start counting the 2,000 ums. So if the houses are less than the 70, just under 71 amos, next of Kibbur, it's all considered connected. It's all the one town, even though there might be technically another town, the city of whatever, and then and often in where we live, you walk a few blocks and there's another city officially. So even though it's different cities, or I'm sure there are some places that are built up that you could cross to another state even, and there's houses. Right, so it's all built up along the way. I know in Australia, the state of New South Wales and Queensland, all right, New South Wales and Victoria, so Melbourne and Sydney, the states they're in, there's a large city on either side of the state border. So and they join up. Both of them go right to the border, and the border is a narrow river. It's wide in some places, but where the city is quite narrow. And you can just, while still being in the same city from a Shabbos perspective, even though it's a different city, respect having a city council, but you even go to another state. And, I wouldn't be surprised in certain places in Europe, you go walk to another country, but it's all still houses built up along the way. So you didn't leave the city in respect to Tchum Shabbos, even though you went to another country. So we're not worried about what the artificial boundaries are. We're just looking, are the houses closer than approximately 35 meters from each other? And if they are, it all joins together. And if the population keeps going like this, soon you'll be able to walk across the entire world, and there'll just be houses everywhere. Apartment buildings, no, probably not, but it could happen in theory. V'shayich la'ir, and it's all part of this city from a Shabbos perspective, as long as the houses are within that. Afilu mahalik kama yomim, even if you could walk many days, just keep walking many days. Still, it's all considered the same city in respect to the Tchum. And from the last house, right, of this group of houses, Noidim is the Karpov, then you measure the Karpov, this just under 72 Amos, or Tchum Shabbos, and then you start counting the Shabbos boundary of 2,000 Amos of approximately a kilometer, approximately 2/3 of a mile. So it's all from the end of the houses. All right. Questions, thoughts, comments? Yes.
We are from the Twin City area. It's Minneapolis and St. Paul,
Okay.
divided by a very wide Mississippi River. This very, very long bridge between both of the cities. How do you consider it in that case?
So bridges we're going to get to. Generally speaking, if it's a very long bridge, meaning that there's not buildings, these 35 meters apart, then it's going to separate. But again, sometimes a bridge can be a building. Sometimes, particularly older bridges, you have like like gatehouses. It used to be like I don't think they really have guards there now, or even toll booths. Different things that there are things that could technically join it.
Okay.
Okay, so Gimel number 3. Ein noisen karpaf elo le'ir. Now this karpaf, this 70 2/3, just under 71 amos, extra space is only if it's a city. And again, the two definitions of city, a walled city or many houses. So that's when instead of 2,000 amos, you get 2,070 and a bit. Avo labais echad, but one house, you got a farmhouse, and so it's just your property, and the next property is quite a distance, so they don't join together. Ein noisen karpaf. There's no karpaf. There's this 70 2/3 area doesn't come into play. Ela takef mekir habayis v'chutz maschilim doitchim Shabbos. But rather from the wall of the house, you begin to count the Shabbos boundary. Now, if you have a fenced-in property, then from the fence of the house, that's also part. Well, that's just for this example that it's giving. You have a house on the side of the highway, and it's just the house. There's not a fenced-in area, and it's the house fronts onto the road. So from the wall of the house starts the 2,000 amos. Dalet, number 4. So you got two cities close to each other, right? So a little bit as like you were saying. And as I actually haven't been there to see it, that's why I didn't want to give a specific answer on that city. But we'll start getting the parameters, and then those who know the geography will be able to apply it. So two cities close to each other. So we give, each one has a karpaf. Each one has this just under 71 amos, just approximately 35 meters. And therefore, if you don't have, if the gap is not bigger than two of those, so just under 142 karpafs, amos, sorry, the shavash shteim le'achas, so like one city. So we're going to say approximately 70 meters. I know what's that, about 55 feet, something like, I guess, something roughly, I don't know. So if the gap between the cities is less than that, then it's one city. Hey, number 5. There are many halachas, many laws. Now, again, we're doing the abridged code of Jewish law here. So it's a summary. So what we find, not so much in the chapters we've been learning now, but, some of the other chapters, you sometimes have paragraph 4 ends in, and if this happens, consult a rabbi. And then chapter 5 says, well, this and this and this, but if this happens, consult a rabbi, and so on and so forth. Because there are so many different factors that could go into it that you can't put that in a summary. It's not a summary anymore. So we're going to have something similar here. Now, there are many things. So we've kept it simple so far. We've said it's a walled city. So you just start counting from the wall, the 70 and 2/3, and then the 2,000 ams. You know, it's a bunch of houses. You know, got a city, it's unwalled. You know, the houses all pretty much end at the same point. Again, we kept it simple. So we start counting from there. It's just a house. So we count from the wall, or I pointed out for fenced-in property from the fence. But, you know, often cities don't end all in a straight line. And sometimes even walled cities can have bits that stick out, have battlements and different things. Excuse me 1 minute. Or you have, even in a walled city, you can have a little something built outside the city, or, you know, so there are many factors to what can be considered an extension. And generally, we have many opportunities to be lenient to extend how far you Shabbos. But you should only do this if you have consulted an expert in the halacha. So again, it's not going through all the details. It's saying that if you have such a situation, you need to consult someone who knows the material well. Yes, Susan. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No, it's fine. I'm just curious about a seawall. Is a seawall considered connecting the properties together? A seawall,
Well,
because of the keys. I'm thinking about the keys. I know there are several Chabad, places in the keys. I don't know exactly where, but
yeah, look, I mean, probably having the sea is going to be an interruption.
oh,
So again, it's going to depend how big it is. So let's say, let's now
Okay, so
again,
forget-
I'm not sure exactly how the keys works. Again, I can't say I was never there. We did drive past or something once, but I don't recall. You know, I don't have it clear in my mind what it looked like. But let's say
bunch of little pieces of
if
land.
they're
that
all
are
connected to a
Yes.
common point of land, which is how I think it works,
Right.
then they're all connected. You know, it'd be like a town that, you know, you've got streets. Between the streets, maybe you had a field, but you can come back down the street, go up the next street, you know,
Okay.
various things.
All right.
So that would all be one. But if they were, again, not necessarily the keys, but somewhere it was more like islands, you know, even if,
Well, that's
or-
what the keys are.
or-
A bunch of islands that are connected. Exactly.
yeah, but here they are all joined by land, by
Right,
part of the
correct.
city.
Yes.
So I'm saying if they weren't connected, you know, there's just like some type of, you know, little bridge or something. So as long as they're within approximately 70 meters
Okay.
from each other, then they're joined. If they're further, then it's problematic. You know, if there's no way to join them by land, then they can't be joined anyway, because we can't go by boat on Shabbos. You know, look, there's very shallow water. You could just walk across, but once you can't walk across, then we're not meant to swim on Shabbos, because the rabbinic decree, because we may end up making a boat, right? So if we go swimming, then we could make some type of we could build some type of device, either a boat, floating device, or something. Right. So, Vov, number 6. So far, we've said what our limit is. Now, in our introduction, I explained the idea of making an artificial Shabbos residence, so you can go further. That's what we're going to start getting into now. So, number 6. Hanitzrach leches b'Shabbos or b'Yontiv, yoyser mitchum Shabbos. On Shabbos or Yontiv, you need to go further than this tchum, further than this boundary. So, what do? Sarech laniach be'erev Shabbos or be'erev Yontiv erev tchum. You have to set up, you have to place an erev tchumim. Now again, we're going to explain the next one, what you do to set it up. So let's leave that aside to the next paragraph. But whatever it is that we'll explain shortly needs to be set up before the Shabbos Yom Tov. So Yom Tov also has this concept. And you have to place it within the tchum of the city so you can get to it on Shabbos, right? If you've got a place that's, let's say 10,000 amos from where you live, and you set up an 8 of Tavshilin, an 8 of Tchumim, 1,900 amos from that place. So that works fine to walk from that place to the destination. But you can't get to your place on Shabbos because you're 8,000 amos away. So wherever you set it up, so you really can't have a gap larger than 3,999, whatever amos. You have to have a place in between. So it has to be within 2,000 amos away, the city you are. Now, that's from your city. You might live 5,000 amos inside the city. That's not a problem. But as we said, the city is like one personal space on Shabbos. So it has to be within there, and it has to be, your destination has to be within 2,000 amos of the new Shabbos residence as well. Okay, Makom Sheniach is Erev, and this place where you set up this Erev, Nech Shavloi Kilohu Darsham, it's like that is your residence. That's your halachic residence. That's your home for the Shabbos. And although you might think that's pulling a bit of a swifty, not really being genuine, often we go away for Shabbos, and our residence for that Shabbos is not our home, it's where we are. So again, those who signed on late, there's the details in the chat about the son's wedding, God willing. So we're going to be that Shabbos in Florida. Now, Florida is well and truly more than 2,000 amos, more than a kilometer, 2/3 of a mile from Phoenix, right? But because that's where I am before Shabbos begins, then now that becomes my Shabbos residence, even though it's not my home. So, it's a very logical thing. Someone can set up a temporary, you can have your Shabbos residence for this Shabbos. That's not your actual house. And we'll do it very often. And so setting up this place, even though it might be in the open, it might be in a field, it might be something, but it's just the same idea. And since I put food there, well, we'll explain how we set it up, even though I might not be sleeping there, is not a problem. And therefore, I now have from that place, from my new residence, I can go 2,000 amos radius, all directions on Shabbos. So therefore, it's it's self-understood. Right? So this is as was Isaac mentioned when I gave my introduction, that now that you have 2,000 amos from the new location, what you've gained in one direction, you've lost in the other direction. Right, so let's just use a simple example. I have my normal house. I set up my Shabbos residence 1,500 amos away, so I can walk there on Shabbos. I now get 2,000 amos radius from there, so I can go another another 2,000 to the place I want to go to. But from my home, I've only got 500 available because my Shabbos residence for this Shabbos is not my house. It's the one I set up.
1,500 amas away.
Right. 1,500 amas away. So Derech Moshel is going to give, is also giving an example. I set up my Erev at the end of 2,000 amas in the east. So 1,999. Also, leches klum ma'ariv. I can't go anywhere westward. Well, I can go one amma. But if you actually set it up exactly 2,000, I can't even go 1 foot in the other direction. Because I'm already at the extreme boundary of my Shabbos residence. Okay, so just to summarize number 6, wherever we set up this Erev Techumim, that now becomes my halachic residence for Shabbos. And it's from there that I have 2,000 amas. Not from where I am when Shabbos begins. And again, that this works out, I mean, today we all live in cities and various things. So the shul is also in the city and the whole city is one area. But, let's say we lived in the country and, maybe the shul is 1,000 amas from my home. So I'm not talking about now setting up an Erev Techumim, just in general. So even though I happen to be in shul when Shabbos begins, I went there early, for the afternoon service of Mincha. And when twilight was, I was in shul, not at home. But still my Shabbos residence is at home because my intention was that I'm living in my house. So I can still only go 1,000 amas the opposite direction of my house from the shul, even though that's where I was when Shabbos began. And I've got a 2,000 amma radius from my home, which would mean I could even go 3,000 amas from the shul, presuming it's all in a straight line. Right? So even when I'm not setting up an Erev Techumim, your residence is not necessarily where you are at the moment Shabbos began. It's where you had the intention to make your residence. And so here, my intention was not in my regular house. It's in this new place where I've set up the Erev Techumim. Okay. Any questions on that? Yeah, Susan.
Can another person use your residence as their temporary in other words, temporary house, a guest?
If they had intention before Shabbos. Now, when I set up this one, I put the food in, maybe they have to chip in, even if it's just a token amount to have something. But let's first use a simple example. So, as I said, I'm not in 3 Shabbos from now, I'll be in Florida, right? So it's not my house. So I'm going to be, and even though I didn't pay the rent or mortgage that month, or doing for them, I'm just going to be a guest. So that will be my residence. But I intended to do that before Shabbos. If I was on the road and I had no idea that there's a farmhouse further down the road, and after Shabbos began, I walked 1,000 amas to the farmhouse. Well, my residence is where I was when Shabbos began, because I didn't have intention to spend Shabbos in the farmhouse. So it's only after Shabbos began, there's I've got a place. So obviously I'm not going to arrive in Florida on Shabbos, so that issue is not going to. I'm willing. That's not going to affect, but just the contrast. So that's like being a guest with someone or staying with someone. So this artificial residence that we create, this halachic residence, it's going to be the same idea. It's going to be dependent on, did I have intention to do on Shabbos? So if I set up an Erev Techumim because I'm planning to go on Shabbos, and then Shabbos morning, my friends who knew nothing about it or did know but wasn't intending to be part of it, comes and says, oh, I want to go with you to Yankel's house too, he can't use that Erev Techumen because he didn't have an intention before Shabbos. Right, so he's stuck. Okay, any other questions? All right, so let's go to number 7. Keitzad oisen es Erev. How do we make this Erev? This Erev Techumen. We've been saying it extends our residence. Now we can go in all directions. But how do we actually do it? The Lekeach pas kedei mozen shtei seudos oliftam. We have to have enough bread for 2 Shabbos meals, or a side dish, going betzalim or tznoin kedoim, or like onions or radish. Sheyesh boy shil achle im pas. That's enough to eat with the bread. So either the bread alone for 2 meals, or bread and side dish for 2 meals. So less bread with some side dish. What? In other words, enough that we can have 2 Shabbos meals. So that's what I have to put. Sheyesh boy shil achle im pas. It's enough side dish that if I had it together with how much bread I put there, it would combine to make 2 meals. So 2 meals of food must contain bread. It could be totally bread, but at least must have some bread, and the combination of the bread and whatever else, or just bread, has to be enough for 2 meals. However, there are some exceptions. Chutz min hamelech min hamayim she'em arvim behem. Salt and water don't count. So other drinks potentially do, but not water, because there's and not salt. They're not considered food per se for this type of thing. Now, so I take this food, and I transport it to the place that I want to set up my Erev, and I put it there before Shabbos. I'm a varich, and I make the following bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, God, Elokeinu, our God, Melech HaOlam, King of the universe, Sher Kedushan is Vaisav, that makes us holy through his mitzvahs. The Tzivanu are mitzvahs Erev, and he commanded us the mitzvah of Erev. And then I say, V'zeh ha'erev. With this, I am making an Erev. So you have to make the declaration. Then I'm allowed to go 2,000 amma radius in all directions from this place. And then I go back home, because I'm not planning to travel till tomorrow morning, Shabbos morning. Now, you can put an Erev, one Erev, for many Shabboses. In other words, let's say I want to walk to a place the next 3 weeks. So I can put the food there once, and as long as the food remains, it doesn't get eaten, as long as it still exists, I can use an Erev for 3 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever. As long as I put it in a safe place. I had a safe there that only I know the combination. And obviously not an electric combination, because then I can't open the Shabbos. So in there, it has to be somewhere protected, and all the food should not get lost, destroyed, a bear eat it or something, or spoil, or get ruined from the rain or something. Because if I want to use it next Shabbos, it still has to exist in a usable way the next Shabbos. Any questions?